So you're a developer who has this great idea for an app. You really want to get stuck in and just start working on this new idea, your new functionality, but then you immediately lose motivation because you don't want to go through all this dumb boilerplate stuff that you have to go through every time you make a new app. Set up the database, set up authentication, decide, what backend as a service you want to use, try and learn the client-specific libraries for how to use it and everything. And you wish you could just kind of get all that stuff automated every time you want to work on a new project, and you kind of want to use standardized things like GraphQL or whatever rather than, you know, having to learn client specific libraries for every backend as a service that's out there these days. So this is my solution to that problem. We get auto-generated GraphQL on your data, built-in email and password role-based, JSON web tokens. All you need is Docker to get going, and all it uses is GraphQL and REST. You don't need to install any, specific packages or whatever that just bloats your app and just increases that mental load of things you have to learn. Um, and it's currently, this version's built using Spring Boot, Java, and all the source code is here. So, you can just expand it outwards as you want if that's something you want to do as well. Add your own custom business logic really easily. You're not just stuck with what's there at the time, and you can just turn it into what you want. So before we get started, the only things you're going to need are Docker and Docker Compose, and you will need to install the Hasura CLI as well. But check the description. You'll see a link to the repository there, and you can basically follow along with the setup. There's a written version here in the README. But yeah, so this video is basically just showing you what this is, how to get it set up, and a little bit on how to use it. So I already have this stuff installed. If I head to my terminal, I type in Hasura, we see, all right, I already have the CLI there. I have Docker ready to go. You can see it's a fully blank slate. I don't have any containers, images, or volumes set up yet. So there's nothing funky going on my machine that I've already set up before you guys. So you should be able to follow along pretty closely to what I'm doing here. So let's get started and we'll clone this repository. So I'm opening up Get Kraken, use terminal, whatever. I guess, if you're following this tutorial, you should at least know how to clone a repository. So we'll open that quickly and yeah, we'll get started. So before you can run anything, because the repository essentially only contains the source code for the backend part that handles the auth, I chose not to include a build to kind of make it easier for you to expand stuff if you want. But if you don't want to expand the backend, you don't know Java, don't know backend, you just want to kind of use it as is, that's completely fine. I've added a script that will build the backend or Java part for you without needing to install Java or know how to do any of that fancy stuff. So before we can actually build the Java image and kind of do anything else, we need to set up a .env file. Basically, all the containers that I've set up and the backend as well use environment variables for a lot of things, especially since some of them share the same value, or they need values to be the same. So if you head back to the repository and you scroll down a bit into the README, you will see I have an example.env file here. This is basically what I've used. All these values is what I've used while I've been making this during development. And it's kind of good, it works fine for like a local setup. You'll obviously need to change these if you want to, put it in dev or production or whatever. But, for this tutorial, this is perfectly fine. You can just copy these values essentially. So I'll head to my terminal and we'll head into the repository and we will make a env file and we'll open that up and we will just copy what I have here inside. Cool. So once that's set up, we are ready to build the Java part, which is the only part that I guess isn't built really. So to do that, I've created a script that'll let you do that, or that'll do that for you. So it's just called build server. Now this will take a while because it has to go off and download all of the dependencies. You can, if you're regularly iterating over the backend, you'll want to find a better way to do this, or you'll just run it locally while you're testing, and then every time you build it, it'll still take a while. You can look up how to set up caches for Maven locally, so it'll kind of download from there rather than re-downloading everything every time. But that's kind of out of the scope of this tutorial. So if you want to do that, look into that yourself. But essentially, it's going to take ages to build this. So I will be back when that's finished, and we will continue. Great, so once the image has finished being built, well, you can see here in my Docker desktop, we have the image there. So once that's ready to go, you're ready to just run Docker Compose up, and that will get everything running. So there's 3 parts to this. There's the image we just built, which is the Java backend part. There's a Postgres container, full database, and a Hasura GraphQL server that connects to that database container and gives you instant GraphQL and everything, and is basically what your front end will be sending requests to most of the time. So once that's finished, we should see everything pop up here in our Docker. Shouldn't take too long. If you already have Postgres, like a Postgres image, maybe use that one, or maybe you might need to change the compose file to use a different image maybe than one you have locally. If you do run into problems at some point, I have had bugs where if I'm running Postgres locally, not within Docker, I need to shut that down first before I'm able to get the container working. So if you run into problems connecting to your Postgres container, that could be something worth looking into. We'll just wait for this to finish here. Shouldn't take anywhere near as long as it did to build the other image. Great, so that's running. We can see it's running here in the terminal. We can see all 3 of our containers running here. So Spring is the one that I built myself. And the Postgres and the Hasura are kind of predefined images downloaded off of Docker Hub or wherever it was. Essentially, the Docker Compose file is a modified version of the one found in the Hasura documentation. To get started, I basically added a couple more settings in there for the Hasura setup, alongside, adding, I guess, commands to get, add my own Spring server running there as well. So once that's running, we can open it up in our browser. Now, hopefully, you're at least slightly familiar with Hasura or the UI. I'm not going to go over too much, but there's nothing here yet. If we go to data, there's nothing here. So what we need to do is set the database name as default, select environment variable here, and then we're going to go back to the repository because I use this as my environment or my env file. We need to copy, not from there. we actually need to go into the code now. So I'm going to open another terminal, zoom that in a bit, and then we will open this in VS Code. And then we'll head into the Docker Compose file. So in here, we have a environment variable, pg database URL. So this basically uses the values we put in our env file to construct the path to our database. So we just copy the name of this variable, and we can go ahead and we can stick that in here, and boom, Hasura is now connected to our database. But there's nothing in our database yet. And I have set it up so that there is kind of like a starting schema and stuff for you. So in order for that to kind of get applied, I wrote a script that will do that for you. So basically what it's going to do is call some commands using the Hasura console, which we installed earlier, which will go through this Hasura folder in the repository and apply metadata and migrations to your database. So the migrations will be kind of SQL that will be applied to make tables, put some values in. And then the metadata is kind of what Hasura uses to kind of do its setup and stuff on top of the database. Okay, so we'll go ahead and run the script I've made that will kind of do all that stuff for us, which is just simply db setup. And then you can just like all default, there's only the one database connected, so it doesn't matter which one you choose, and done, that's it. So we open up our console again, we refresh the page, and wow, we got some stuff here. Cool, so I've basically added a couple tables here. So we've got a users table, this is really simple, ID, email, password, user roles. This is set up as an enum table in Hasura, but not an enum table in Postgres. The idea is basically you can't, you shouldn't really add or remove values from this very often because you have to manually reload the values when you do. But it kind of makes inserting stuff easier when using the UI if it's an enum table. And then we have the assigned user roles table. So this is basically a joining table between the other two. You can scroll down in the README. You'll see a nice little picture diagram that kind of explains it, as well as kind of a little bit of a write-up that will explain some of the stuff or why I kind of have it set up this way. So that's basically running now. We can you know, start writing queries and things now if we want to do stuff. This stuff won't be here for you though, because this is cached and this will be selected. So this is more what it will look like running on your machine right now. So, you know, we can see all our tables here, we can query them or, you know, start doing GraphQL things. But, you know, it would be kind of silly if this was just it, because one of the really, really awesome things about Hasura is the role-based or the permissions, basically. So currently, you know, there's the default admin. Within the Docker Compose file from before, I have also added an unauthorized default role. So any requests that you make to the server that don't have an authorization header or whatever will basically be given the role anonymous. So any tables or rules you make, you should be able to just add anonymous and set your rules up. And so any unauthorized request you send will have those rules applied to them. So yeah, that's pretty cool. So let's go ahead and register a user. So, you know, we can see our table's kind of empty right now. So I'm going to bring up Postman and I'm going to send a post request to 8080 API user register. It's just going to be a JSON body with an email and a password. I've set up the user table where every user has an ID, which is unique, auto-generated when the person is inserted, but the email also has to be unique as well. So we have an email and a very, very strong password here. If we go ahead and send that, we get an okay response, cool. Hopefully our registration worked. We refresh our console, boom. We have our user set up there. We have their email there. We have a hash of their password. And it's also automatically created an entry into the assigned user roles table where it gives the new user the role of role user. So, you know, now this is another sort of role you can start using. Essentially, any values you put within the user roles table will work as a kind of role to use in permissions. So when you register a new user, they automatically get this role applied to them. So you can see that user's ID and the role. So using the UI and stuff, we can kind of see that relationship there. Yeah, so that's all done automatically. So if we want to log in with this user, we'll head to my login endpoint. You just call do another post request, localhost 8080 API login. This has to be in kind of format rather than a JSON body. So we have the email, password. These are the same as what I did when registering. We'll try and log this person in, and boom, we get an access token as well as a refresh token. So now we can go ahead and we can head to JWT.io and we'll chuck this in there, see what we have. Cool. So by default, or the Hasura default role value will be role user for anyone who's logged in, as well as it will contain their user ID. This is, also can be used within the Hasura kind of permissions system. And we have all of their allowed roles here. So yeah, you can see that there. Basically, if you add any more roles to this user using the assigned user roles table, any role that the user has will appear within this array and can therefore be used in Hasura. In order to check the kind of expiration of the tokens as well as the refresh tokens, we can head into the source code. And so this is kind of, where if you wanted to make your own changes, this is the type of thing you could maybe want to do. I should probably extract this out into like an environment variable maybe. I probably will at some point. But if you want to change kind of, how long it takes for the tokens to expire, you can just head in here. Can't remember exactly where it is. It'll be in the JWT service. So when it's making the token, the expiration is set at 10 minutes, while the refresh token is set at 30 minutes. So if you wanted to change those, just come in here, change the values, rebuild the image using the script that I showed you earlier, and there you go. So yeah, and then essentially, whenever you want to log in with the user, you would just add this as the authorization header. And if you want to refresh the token, so, from your front end, we grab the token here. There's a refresh endpoint. So that's just get localhost 8080 API user refresh. And you want to send the refresh token in the authorization header. So we'll put that here. The new refresh token, we'll send that, and we get the same refresh token back, but we get a new access token ready to go and refreshed. So one thing we can do is take this refresh, this access token, we'll copy that. So we can see in our Hasura dashboard right now, basically. It's basically giving us the role of admin, or simulating that we're an admin by default. So we can untick this box. And so basically there's nothing available for us as an anonymous user. So let's say we want to, add something for an anonymous. Let's say we want to see what the available roles are. We'll go to the permissions, we'll go anonymous, and we just want to select everything. So without any checks, we'll select all of the columns, and we go back. Cool. So as an anonymous user, we're able to select user roles, but that's not really helpful. Let's say as a user, we only want to be able to select from the user table, where we are the user ourselves, where we can only select our own information, basically. So in this instance, so we would say role user select with custom check when we want where the ID equals X Hasura ID. So this is what's from here. So basically, if the ID in the token matches the ID in the table, then we can get the information from that row in the table. So let's say, we want to get everything aside from the password. That query doesn't show up here because we're still anonymous. So we'll add a simulated authorization header. We'll add bearer to the front of that, put our token in there, and wow, we can see we have the users table that we can query now. So, and we want the email and ID, and only our information is returned because, the ID doesn't match anywhere else. And so, yeah, that's basically it. If you want to, from your front end, start sending like GraphQL queries and stuff, this is the link you want to use. Yeah, it's just standard GraphQL. Cool. So the only thing left is, let's say you want to make changes to the database and you want those changes to be reflected in your Git history, or you want to, be able to track those and reverse them, or, whatever. So essentially, don't make any changes here. Don't create table. Don't, change anything in Hasura here. Like the permissions and things that I did earlier, you don't want to do that here if you want to be able to track those changes. In order to do that, you want to open up your terminal again, and you're going to run the start console script. So what this is going to do is start the Hasura console in a way where it will track in real time changes you make to the database. So you can see everything here is the same as it is. The data is still there and everything. It's the same as it is over here. But if I now go here and I create a table, let's just say new table, we'll have an ID of UUID. It's auto-generated and is a unique value with a primary key of ID, and I add that table. Cool, we have our new table here. We can go and we can open up Git Kraken, and we can see we have all these new changes. Now this is Git Kraken being a little silly, showing files that aren't changed. If I stage and unstage, we can see that these new files here that have actually been changed. So we can see the roles that I had earlier, or the permissions I added are there now. And the table that I added, we have the new table YAML, which was created. Yeah, and so basically that's how you do it. We can see the corresponding SQL to create that table. So that was basically auto-generated, and basically if you were to reset this repository up, or the setup up on a new computer, you would run that DB setup script from before, and then that would basically also apply these new changes to your database setup. So this is kind of how you can create changes if you're working in a team and kind of keep track of everything, and then everyone can apply those exact same changes in the exact same way to their own environment, and everything. So hopefully that's clear. I'll be feel free to leave any comments, questions, and stuff. If you want to know more about how the Hasura migrations and metadata and the console works, you're better off looking at the documentation for that. But hopefully I kind of have enough here with the scripts I've done and kind of this video and stuff where you're able to kind of get what you want done and sorted. So yeah, hopefully that's it. Thanks for watching. Hopefully this was helpful. Hopefully you find this repository and this thing I've created useful. I'm open for feedback and improvements. Let me know what you think. Thanks.